Ron DeSantis' silence on the Trump indictment is deafening. Ron DeSanctimonious, known by many as Deep State Ron, is clearly very happy that former President Trump has been indicted for overdue library books. He is very happy that he is being persecuted by a so-called witch hunt. And yes, I know none of you can hear me, but I am instinctively gesticulating, just like President Trump, as I'm speaking. And in fact, if you look at Ron DeSantis over the last couple of years, you could say I am gesticulating like Ron DeSantis. And so yes, in this opening, I am kind of mocking the both of them. Because I think both DeSantis' supporters and Trump's supporters are, as I've said in the past, increasingly, the more I hear from either one of them, and frankly, the more I hear from Trump and DeSantis, they each make me not want to support the other. Or sometimes they make me not want to support them themselves. With that said, given the odds, the way things stand, there is probably a 90% chance that I will be voting for Donald J. Trump in November of 2024. That's not an endorsement. That's sort of a recognition of fact. DeSantis doesn't seem to have much of a chance, and neither does RFK Jr. Those are the three guys that I would consider voting for. So out of the three, old Donnie J is going to be the one who's most likely to be on the November ballot. But with that said, if Ron DeSanctimonious were to be nominated, let's say Donald Trump gets thrown in prison and the Republican National Committee says, yes, we know that Trump won the primary, but he's in prison now, so we can't nominate him. So we're going to overturn the results of all the primary elections. We're going to free the delegates and let them vote their conscience, and they will unanimously select Ronald DeSantis to be the Republican nominee for president in 2024. Let's say all that happens. Okay. DeSantis, as it stands, will lose a massive portion of Trump's base. There will be a significant percentage. At least one poll that I saw today shows 28%. Or was it 24%? No, I think it was 28% of the Republican primary electorate will not vote for any candidate but Trump. The same poll, however, said that 24% of the Republican primary electorate will not vote for Trump under any circumstances. I find both of those figures kind of hard to believe, particularly the one about 24% of Republican primary voters not wanting to vote for Trump under any circumstances. I find that a little hard to believe. I haven't seen Trump's unfavorable ratings among Republicans lately, but every time I've seen his favorable ratings among Republicans, it's always in the very high 90s. For 24% of Republicans to say that they would absolutely never vote for Trump, that would mean that his unfavorable ratings, or that his favorability ratings, let's say, are down in the 70s at the highest. Now, this presents quite a problem either way, because what this would seem to suggest is that no matter who is the nominee, Trump or DeSantis, neither of them can unite the Republican Party. That's what we're supposed to believe. Well, if you think about it, the way this primary has gone so far, even though it's only been going on for a few weeks, I guess it's not surprising that the Republican Party could not unite entirely behind either one of these men, because there is a contingent of their supporters for each one of these men who are definitely in the ride or die camp. There are a lot of Trump supporters who look at DeSantis and say that he's a deep state plant, that he worked at Gitmo and he helped get plea bargains for child molesters. And they say that Florida actually isn't very based at all, because the things that DeSantis stands for don't matter, and that, Disney's actually pretty cool, and so is Bud Light, and abortion is actually pretty good. And so if you throw all that stuff out, DeSantis actually sucks. I've been hearing a lot of that from the Trump supporters. Then you have a lot of DeSantis supporters online who are just making fun of Trump voters and saying, well, anyone who votes for Trump is just a dumb redneck and they're a pillbilly, and they probably they won't be able to put down their heroin needle long enough to get out to the polls anyway, so it doesn't matter. We shouldn't worry about their vote. And the Trump supporters say, if you even consider voting for anyone who is not Trump, if you even consider the other candidates in this primary, you're a traitor to the dear leader, and you are un-American, and you're the enemy. And so you have both sides here, the supporters of both of these candidates, saying that you can't be that essentially, if you are a supporter of on the other side, you're dead to them. And if you are in either one of these camps, if you are pro-Trump or pro-DeSantis and you hear the other side saying this about you, you would be probably inclined not to vote for their candidate if they end up winning. You'll be pretty bitter. And this, I think, is a shame because these two each of them would be the best Republican nominees of my lifetime. I think that is pretty indisputable. Now, I'm only in my 20s, so I haven't had a lot of great Republican nominees in my lifetime, Bush and McCain and Romney and all those guys. But that's a lot of years. And between the two of them, either Trump or DeSantis, Trump 2024, I think would be a better nominee than Trump 2020, certainly, and probably better than Trump 2016. I think that Trump is in a better place now than he was back then, kind of mentally, mindset-wise. He's less naive. He's still very naive. He's still ignorant. He still is averse to learning, and I don't think that Trump has, picked up a book or anything in the meantime. But I think he's slightly more aware that neocons are actually his enemy and he shouldn't hire them and put them into positions of power. So, with that said, Trump is a better person now. He would make a better president than he was in 2020 or in 2016. And DeSantis, based on his time as governor since 2020, now if you go back to 2018 to 2020, I had nothing special to say about DeSantis. He was just normal Republican guy. I had no opinion of him, really. It was when we got into mid-2020, and after about a month, he said, you know what, this lockdown stuff, not such a great idea. Why don't we start opening up our restaurants slowly, not entirely. You have to give credit to Brian Kemp, I remember, was the first one who ended the shutdowns. That was all the way back in March of 2020. They went for 2 weeks in Georgia, so you have to give the edge to Kemp on that one. But DeSantis pretty quickly wised up, and I thought at the time, I could tell when he did the press conference, it's he's being strong-armed into this. He doesn't believe what he's saying. He doesn't believe that closing restaurants, which is all that we did here in Florida, that closing restaurants was going to stop the spread of the virus. You could tell his heart wasn't in it. But anyway, since he started on that stuff, and he was, ahead of the curve on vaccine mandates and trying to get rid of those, and he hired a great Surgeon General, and he's done some good stuff, heartbeat bills, constitutional carry. Florida is now a red state, and when DeSantis was elected, this was very, very much a swing state. DeSantis won by 20,000 votes or something. So he's a successful guy. He's done good things as governor. And so he certainly, like Trump, is a better candidate than anyone else in my lifetime. Okay? So whether you have a preference for one or the other, I kind of don't. I have reasons to dislike both of them. So it's hard for me to pick a favorite because they both frustrate me to certain extents. I still would not want to destroy either of them in a general election. I would still rather see them win. And I don't always say that. I've said in the past, I'd be happy to let, to let the Dem win rather than try and, stick my neck out for a Kevin McCarthy. But both these guys, I think there's a chance there would be a net positive impact from their presidency, meaning the country would be in a better place by the end of their term than it was at the start. It's not just that I think that they would slow the decline. I'm not interested in slowing the decline. But, as I've said, It doesn't look like we're going to be able to make that happen because we can't have nice things. Now, who gets the blame for this? The blame's kind of split. On the one hand, I don't think that there was any chance that you were ever going to convince Trump that someone who challenges him in a primary election is anything but his enemy. That's just his attitude. You know, you disagree with him even a little bit, you're his enemy. That is, unless you're like some neocon slob like Lindsey Graham. Then you're his best friend. Even though Lindsey Graham actually did run against Trump in a primary way back in 2016. Now that's all water under the bridge. And DeSantis is the new enemy. And I think we can all be certain that if DeSantis were to become the nominee, Trump would actively campaign against him and urge his supporters to stay home or to, perhaps just write in Donald Trump's name. But whatever they did, not support the nominee who isn't Trump, whether it was DeSantis or not. It just so happens that DeSantis is the one running against him. If Chris Christie somehow, through a stroke of very, very bad luck, became the Republican nominee, perhaps if we tripped and fell through a wormhole and on the other side, Chris Christie was the 2024 Republican nominee, Donald Trump would do everything in his power to stop him. And so if you're Ron DeSantis, you have to know this when you're getting into the race. And so to that extent, I have to put some blame on Ron DeSantis, because Ron DeSantis knew that this was the end result. He knew that if you come at the king, you better not miss. But guess what? The bad news for DeSantis, even if he didn't miss, which I believe he has missed big time, bigly, if he was able to decapitate, figuratively speaking, Trump's campaign, Trump supporters would just pick up their toys and go home. But that might not be the case if DeSantis showed some leadership, tried to be somewhat magnanimous, and expressed, at least paid lip service to this idea that Trump is being unfairly persecuted. I think that might actually, that might go some of the way to ingratiating him amongst Trump's supporters, who, if he actually were to become the nominee, their votes he would need desperately. And so it's stupid that DeSantis is ignoring this whole situation. It's a big news story. You can't act like it's not newsworthy. DeSantis is essentially acting like Jake Tapper. CNN was showing a video of Trump just eating at a restaurant at Versailles restaurant in Miami. It's a casual diner, but it's kind of famous. It's an old place. A lot of people go there. Trump went there for lunch after pleading not guilty. And guess what? A lot of people there recognized him and said, "Hey, Mr. President, I just want to say, we think what they're doing to you is totally wrong, and we support you." And, people were happy to see him. And they were, wanting to shake hands and take pictures with him while he was eating. And CNN was disgusted by this. They said, "Where are the protesters? Where are the people in the restaurant who are angry at him? Why isn't anyone shouting and calling him a fascist?" And so Jake Tapper told the control room, he said, "Get this off my screen. Get it off America's TVs. We can't show people Trump being liked by the public. This is turning into a campaign ad. This is horrible." That's essentially how DeSantis is acting by ignoring this situation. He did the same thing, interestingly enough, with the Mar-a-Lago raid, which this stems from. He was silent on the Mar-a-Lago raid, which I thought was very telling. And it wasn't until like 3 days later that he finally issued a statement. And I thought back then, okay, maybe he learned his lesson. Maybe he should learn that, certain things are more important than politics, and that just because this is happening to your political opponent, you shouldn't just stand by and ignore it. You should show some leadership and say, hey, in Ron DeSantis' America, these sorts of things wouldn't happen. That's what you should say. But this time, so far, he has not, which is quite telling. To me, it would seem to indicate that he supports this and that he doesn't think it is wrong. Otherwise, he would be joining Vivek Ramaswamy, who gave an actually very good speech, and I think smart campaign move. He went outside the courthouse there in Miami and gave a speech to the Trump supporters and said, hey, I know you support the other guy in this race, but I think that what they're doing to him, this is bigger than politics. This is bigger than our silly little, primary campaign. What they're doing is not right. And if I were president, I would pardon him immediately because this is a witch hunt. And you know what? People like that a lot. And they would said to themselves, you know what? Even though I'm not voting for that Vivek guy, maybe I would vote for him in a general election if he were the nominee, because he seems like a stand-up guy. He seems to actually care about the same things that I do. If you are supposedly people who are in the same party, maybe you should kind of have the kumbaya moment and say, you know what, Trump, even though I, Ron DeSantis, am running against you in this primary, we are united on this issue. Is that really so hard? Because if he did that, maybe there would be a better chance that some of that 28% of Trump or die vote wouldn't stay home if Ron DeSantis were the nominee, which he won't be in all likelihood. So that's my rant for the day. I think that DeSantis is receiving very bad advice, and the fact that he's taking that advice and that he even has people giving him this advice around him indicates that, well, it doesn't bode well if he actually were to become president. Because when he was governor, he had very good advisors around him. Now he seems to have people around him who are out of touch and, frankly, opposed to much of what the average Republican voter holds dear. And I don't say that with glee. Sadly, DeSantis, if he is indeed soiled by the consultant class, he was not the first and he won't be the last. It's happened to many good candidates over the year. They get the money, the infusion of cash from the donors, and the donors say, here, now you have to hire all these people who I know, and they hire these consultants, and they run their campaigns into the ground. They soak up a bunch of money, they bleed them dry, and then they move on to the next victim, their next host. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.